The bank congratulated me on a loan I never applied for and a debt I could never repay. My credit history was destroyed in less than a second. And the worst part, someone had signed my name with a precision even I couldn't achieve. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee and checking unimportant emails. I assumed it was just advertising until I read the word approved. I frowned. I hadn't requested any credit. I opened the email with a discomfort that crawled through my stomach like a bad premonition. The attached document detailed a personal loan for an amount that exceeded everything I had earned in the last 3 years. My heart started beating faster. "This has to be a mistake," I whispered, trying to convince myself. But when I logged into the bank portal, the mistake wasn't just real, it was devastating. There wasn't one loan. There were 7. I felt my coffee grow cold in my hands as I reviewed the dates, the amounts, the overdue payments. Each number was a blunt strike against my chest. My credit score, which I had carefully protected for years with obsessive discipline, had been reduced to digital ashes. I tried to breathe normally, but the air felt like it wouldn't fully reach my lungs. I began reviewing every contract, every document, every signature. And then something happened that made cold sweat run down my back. The signatures were mine. Not similar. Not imitated. They were identical. That same day, I went to the bank. The taxi ride felt endless. I watched the city pass by through the window, wondering when my life had started collapsing without me noticing. The financial advisor greeted me with a professional smile that disappeared the moment he saw my face. "Sir, according to our records, all loans were requested either in person or through biometric validation," he explained while checking his computer. "That's impossible," I replied, feeling my voice shake. "I never signed any of this." The man turned the screen toward me. There were facial validation photographs. My face was staring directly at the camera. My expression neutral. My ID in hand. I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. "Are you sure it wasn't you?" he asked cautiously. I didn't answer immediately, because in that moment, an idea began forming inside my mind, an idea I tried to reject with all my strength. That night, I returned home with a knot in my throat that refused to disappear. I opened a box where I kept personal documents, old contracts, bank statements. I needed to verify something. I needed to prove this was an administrative nightmare, not a personal attack. While reviewing papers, I remembered something that made me freeze. My sister had always had access to my documents. Since we were young, we shared digital folders, family accounts, even temporary passwords when one helped the other with paperwork. I shook my head. No, that was absurd. She was the person who stood by me in every crisis of my life. The one who defended me when we were kids. The one who knew exactly how hard it was for me to build stability. It couldn't be her. But memories began appearing without permission. The time she asked for photos of my ID for a quick process. The moments she requested to use my email because hers was having problems. The occasions she asked me to sign documents without fully reading them, assuring me they were simple family authorizations. My chest started to feel heavy. I opened my laptop and began reviewing old emails. I searched keywords, attachments, forgotten conversations. Hours later, I found something that made my hands start shaking. An email forwarded from my own account to a secondary address I didn't recognize. The message included a scanned file of my signature. And when I checked the document metadata, a username appeared that felt disturbingly familiar. It was the nickname my sister used on almost all her digital accounts. I slowly closed the laptop. The silence in the house became unbearable. I could hear the ticking of the clock as if it were counting down the time left before facing a truth I wasn't ready to accept. My phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from her. "Everything okay? We haven't talked in days." I stared at the screen for several seconds. I felt a knot in my stomach, mixed with nostalgia, fear, and a sadness I still didn't know how to name. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I only replied, "Yeah, everything's fine." But nothing was fine. Because while I held my phone, a new notification appeared in my email. Another bank. Another loan approved. And this time, the document included an alternative contact address. The address matched exactly with the apartment where my sister lived. I turned off the screen. And for the first time in my life, I understood something terrifying. The worst enemy isn't always someone who breaks into your home. Sometimes it's someone who always had the keys. For days, I tried to convince myself it was all a coincidence. But every document I reviewed seemed to whisper the same name, my sister's. And the deeper I investigated, the clearer it became that my life had been used as the perfect disguise. I didn't sleep that night. The clock read 3 in the morning when I reopened my laptop. The blue light illuminated the empty living room as I reviewed the digital contracts over and over again. I searched for patterns, dates, IP addresses, anything that could prove I was wrong. But instead of relief, I found something worse. The loans weren't just spread across different banks, they were perfectly staggered, as if someone had designed a plan for the financial collapse to be slow, silent, and devastating. Every 6 months, a new credit appeared. Each loan partially paid the previous one, while creating an even bigger one. It was a calculated domino effect. The next morning, I contacted a legal advisor specialized in financial fraud. His office smelled like strong coffee and freshly printed paper. As I explained everything, I watched his expression shift from professional to concerned. "This doesn't look improvised," he finally said. "Whoever did this knew your personal data very well and your financial behavior." A chill ran down my spine. Is it possible to trace who did it? If there was digital identity theft, yes. But I'll warn you, when fraud comes from someone close, it usually leaves emotional traces before technological ones. I didn't know what to say. In the following weeks, my life became an obsession. I reviewed bank statements while walking, eating, even while trying to sleep. My mind wouldn't shut off. The advisor managed to obtain access logs from the platforms where the loans were requested. When I saw the reports, the air felt heavy. The requests came from 2 main locations: my apartment and a home network registered in the building where my sister lived. I tried to stay calm. I kept telling myself that maybe she used my computer without knowing what she was doing. Maybe someone else used her internet connection. Maybe everything had a logical explanation. But then another piece of evidence appeared. A spending summary linked to one of the loans. Purchases at stores I had never visited. Hotel reservations where I had never stayed. Payments to an aesthetic clinic whose name felt strangely familiar. It was the place where my sister said she worked temporarily the year before. I felt something inside me slowly beginning to break. I tried to remember the last time we had a deep conversation. I remembered her voice asking me for financial help months earlier. I remembered how she insisted she only needed a small push to stabilize herself. I had wanted to help her, but I always refused to sign joint loans. I had learned to be careful with money after watching our parents lose everything to debt when we were kids. She knew that. She knew every one of my insecurities, every one of my rules. I decided to see her. Not to accuse her, not yet. I just needed to look into her eyes. We met at a cafe we had visited since our teenage years. The smell of freshly baked bread hit me with memories from a time when the biggest problem was choosing what movie to watch on weekends. She smiled when she saw me. A smile I knew too well. "You look tired," she said softly. "It's been a rough few weeks," I replied. I watched her hands while she spoke. She played with her cup, avoiding direct eye contact. Her voice sounded normal, but there was something about her breathing that felt irregular. "Everything okay with work?" I asked casually. "Yeah, well, you know how it is." Silence. The kind of silence that had never existed between us before. "I need to ask you something," I finally said. She looked up. For 1 second, I saw fear. Just 1 second. "Have you ever used my personal information for any paperwork?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her expression changed, but too quickly, as if she had rehearsed that reaction before. "Of course not," she replied, nervously laughing. "Why would you ask that?" I watched her, waiting for her to add something else. A spontaneous explanation, genuine annoyance. But she just took a sip of coffee and changed the subject. I left the cafe with my chest tight. I didn't have definitive proof yet, but my intuition was screaming that something didn't fit. That same night, my advisor called me. His voice sounded more serious than ever. "We found biometric matches," he said. Time seemed to freeze. "The facial validations don't fully match you, but they do match someone with extremely similar genetic traits." My throat went dry. What does that mean? It means the system detected small variations that usually occur between direct relatives. I stayed silent. The sound of my own breathing seemed to fill the entire room. "There's something else," he continued. "We found transfers from the loans to an account that wasn't under your name." "Whose account is it?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "The account is registered under a small business, but the legal representative is your sister." The phone slipped slightly between my fingers. I didn't feel immediate anger. I didn't feel hatred. Just a cold emptiness expanding inside my chest. I remembered when she taught me how to ride a bike because our parents worked late. I remembered when she defended me at school when I was bullied. I remembered how she hugged me when our grandfather passed away. All of that now collided with the evidence in front of me. "Since when has this been happening?" I asked, barely audible. "Records indicate it started approximately 4 years ago." "For years?" "That meant while we celebrated birthdays, while we shared family dinners, while I trusted her blindly. My identity was being used to build a massive lie." I hung up and walked toward the window. The city glowed with thousands of lights, completely indifferent to the silent collapse of my life. I thought about reporting her immediately. I thought about pretending I never discovered anything. I thought about confronting her. But then I remembered something my advisor mentioned before hanging up. "If you decide to report this, the process could lead to serious criminal charges, and it will probably break your family forever." My phone vibrated again. It was a message from my mother. "Your sister says you've been distant. Did something happen between you two?" I read the message several times. I felt like I was standing at the edge of an emotional abyss I would never return from intact. Because now I had enough evidence to destroy her legally. But I still didn't know if I had the strength to destroy the last family bond when it left. That night, I reviewed the final file my advisor sent me. It was a facial validation video used to approve one of the largest loans. I pressed play. The image showed someone holding my identification card in front of the camera. The lighting was dim, but clear enough to see her face when she raised her eyes. I felt my heart stop. It was her. I turned off the screen with trembling hands. And I understood something terrifying. The real question was no longer whether my sister had ruined my life. The real question was whether I was willing to ruin hers to get mine back. I spent the entire night staring at the frozen video on the screen. My sister was holding my identity as if it were something borrowed. And for the first time, I understood that some truths don't destroy families, they expose them. I asked her to meet me at the apartment where we grew up. I didn't want witnesses. I didn't want interruptions. I just needed answers. I arrived first. The place still carried the scent of old wood and family photographs that seemed to watch me from the walls. Every memory felt like a cruel reminder of what I was about to do. When I heard her keys turning in the door, my chest tightened. She walked in smiling, but her expression changed the moment she saw the documents spread across the table. Silence fell between us like a wall. "What is all this?" she asked, trying to sound calm. I didn't answer. I simply pressed play on the video. Her face lit up the screen. She didn't speak. She didn't try to deny anything. She just stared at it, as if she were watching a version of herself she could no longer defend. "Tell me there's an explanation," I whispered. She closed her eyes. Her shoulders slowly collapsed, as if the weight of the years had finally caught up with her. "It didn't start the way you think," she said, her voice breaking. "Then explain it," I replied, feeling anger and pain battling inside me. She sat across from me, avoiding eye contact. 4 years ago, I owed money. A lot of money. I thought I could fix it quickly. I was only going to take one loan, pay it back, and no one would ever know. My stomach tightened. "But you couldn't pay it back," I said. She slowly shook her head. I tried to cover one with another, and then another, until everything became impossible. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to ask how she could look at our family for years while silently destroying my life. But what came out of my mouth was a different question. Why me? She looked up, and for the first time, I saw real tears fall down her face. Because you trusted me, and because I knew everything about you. Your old passwords, your financial habits. I knew exactly how to do it without making you suspicious. Every word felt like an open wound. Did you know what you were risking? I asked, my voice breaking. I realized it too late. The air in the room became heavy. Outside, the city noise continued its normal rhythm, completely unaware of the collapse happening inside those four walls. If I report this, you could go to prison, I finally said. She nodded silently. She didn't beg. She didn't try to justify herself anymore. That silence hurt more than any excuse. Then she said something I never expected. I never wanted it to end like this, but there's something you don't know. My heart tightened again. What else could possibly be missing? I asked bitterly. She took a deep breath, as if gathering strength was harder than confessing the fraud itself. The first loan wasn't for me. I stared at her, confused. It was for Dad. The world seemed to stop. Dad had medical debts long before we knew about them. I found the documents after he passed away. Mom had no idea. If collectors had discovered everything, she would have lost the house. My mind struggled to process every word. You could have told me, I replied in disbelief. You were building your life, moving forward, and I was always the one who had to solve family problems, she said while crying. I thought I could fix it alone. I felt anger mixing with an even deeper sadness. But you kept going, even after paying Dad's debt. She lowered her gaze. When I finished paying that debt, I was already trapped in others. I was afraid to confess everything, afraid of losing you. Silence returned to the room. I looked at the family photographs on the wall. Us as children, laughing without worries. Us celebrating birthdays. Us believing that trust was indestructible. And I realized something painful. I hadn't just lost my financial stability. I had lost the certainty that I truly knew my own family. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and placed it on the table. All the evidence is here, I said. If I submit it, the case is solid. There's no way to avoid legal consequences. She stared at the folder without touching it. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice trembling. The question I had avoided for months was finally in front of me. I looked at her red, swollen eyes. I looked at the documents. I looked at my life collapsed into red numbers and collection notices. I don't know, I answered honestly. We spent hours talking, crying, remembering, rebuilding pieces of a family history filled with silent sacrifices and mistakes no one wanted to confront in time. Finally, I made a decision. I wouldn't press criminal charges, but I wouldn't hide the truth either. She would sign a legal agreement to assume every debt, surrender her assets, and cooperate in rebuilding my credit history. That meant she would lose almost everything she had built in her adult life. She accepted without arguing. I thought that would be the end. But weeks later, while working with my advisor to repair my credit, I discovered something that changed everything again. One of the largest loans hadn't been requested by her. The signature was different. The IP address came from another country, and the money never reached her accounts. When I confronted her with that discovery, her face showed the same horror I had felt months earlier. I didn't do that one, she whispered. The investigation revealed that by using my identity for years, she had created a digital trail that someone else later exploited to commit an even larger fraud. Someone had used our tragedy as an opportunity. For the first time, my sister and I weren't on opposite sides of the problem. We were trapped in the same disaster. The process of rebuilding my credit history took years. There were endless calls, legal meetings, and moments when I felt I would never recover stability. Our relationship never returned to what it once was. But it didn't disappear either. It transformed into something more fragile, more honest, and painfully real. Today, when I review my restored credit history, I don't feel pride. I feel invisible scars. I learned that identity doesn't only live in documents. It lives in the trust we give others without imagining they might one day use it against us. And I understood something even harder. The worst betrayals don't always come from hatred. Sometimes they come from fear, silence, and misunderstood love. If this story leaves anything behind, it's this. Never assume trust is indestructible. Protect it, even from the people you love. Because rebuilding numbers on a screen is possible, but rebuilding faith in someone can take an entire lifetime.